A group of proud music teachers mock a quiet woman, challenging her to play the hardest piano piece they know. What happens next? No one expected it. At a prestigious music academy known for producing some of the finest classical musicians, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The teachers, seasoned professionals with years of experience, gathered for what they considered a routine day, auditions for a new community music program. They expected eager beginners, maybe a few promising amateurs, but nothing that would challenge their expertise or ego. Among the applicants sat a woman who didn't quite fit in. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, simply dressed in modest clothing, her hair tied back neatly. She spoke to no one, her hands folded quietly in her lap, her eyes scanning the grand piano at the front of the room. She didn't carry herself like someone desperate to prove something, just someone who had come for a reason only she knew. The teachers noticed her immediately, though not with respect. One leaned toward another and muttered, "Probably just here to observe, or learn a few chords." Another chuckled, "She looks like she hasn't touched a piano in her life." Their whispers, though low, weren't exactly discreet. The woman heard them but gave no reaction. She simply waited, her expression unreadable. One by one, applicants were called to the piano. Most fumbled through basic pieces, a few showed promise, and the teachers offered polite encouragement. It was more or less what they had expected. Then came the moment when the head teacher, a tall man with an air of authority, called out the woman's name. She stood without hesitation and approached the piano. The room grew quiet. Some teachers exchanged amused glances, already expecting failure. Without giving her a chance to request a piece, one of them said, with a condescending smile, "Let's try something a bit challenging." He handed her a sheet of music, one of the more demanding classical compositions, filled with complex fingerwork and emotional depth, a piece most students would struggle to attempt, let alone master. There was a pause. The room watched, waiting for her to decline, to stumble, to make excuses. Instead, she gently placed the sheet music on the stand, adjusted the bench, and rested her fingers on the keys. She didn't say a word, but something in the way she positioned her hands made one or two teachers suddenly sit forward, unsure why a sense of unease crept over them. The room had settled into a rhythm. Applicants came and went, each taking their turn at the piano, playing simple scales, short sonatas, and modest beginner pieces. The teachers offered the occasional nod of approval, though nothing sparked real interest. The quiet woman remained seated near the back, unnoticed for the most part, her expression calm, patient. She showed no signs of nervousness, no shifting in her seat or anxious glances toward the piano. She simply waited. Finally, the head teacher looked down at the list and called her name. The woman rose without hesitation, her posture straight, her movements composed. As she walked to the piano, a few teachers leaned back in their chairs, arms folded, their faces betraying amusement. One of them, younger and more arrogant than the rest, spoke loud enough for the others to hear, "Let's see how far she gets before quitting." A soft chuckle rippled through the group. She reached the piano and stood in front of it, waiting. The smug teacher stepped forward, pulling a sheet from a nearby stack. With a sly grin, he handed it to her. "How about something a little more advanced?" "Let's see you try this," he said. It was a notoriously difficult piece, either Liszt's La Campanella or Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a piece that demanded not just technical skill, but deep musical maturity, the kind only the truly gifted could navigate without faltering. The other teachers raised eyebrows. A few exchanged glances. They knew the piece well. No beginner could play it. The message was clear. This was a test meant to humiliate, not challenge. Some whispered jokes under their breath, fully expecting the woman to back away, make excuses, or admit she couldn't read the notes. But she didn't. She offered no response at all. She simply took the sheet, walked to the piano bench, and sat down. Her back straightened, and she placed the music before her. For a moment, she rested her hands in her lap, then slowly brought them to the keys. Her fingers hovered, almost as if remembering something old, something familiar. Then she paused. The room fell completely silent. The air grew thick with quiet anticipation, perhaps mockery from some, mild curiosity from others. No one expected anything more than an awkward few bars before she gave up. The first note rang out with clarity so pure it silenced every stray thought in the room. Her fingers moved with a confidence that left no room for doubt. It wasn't just that she was playing the notes correctly, she was breathing life into them. Every phrase carried emotion, every crescendo a story, every pause deliberate and filled with meaning. The smug expressions on the teachers' faces vanished, replaced by disbelief. One of them, who had been leaning back with arms crossed, slowly leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Another, startled by the sudden brilliance of her opening bars, dropped the pen he'd been absent-mindedly spinning between his fingers. As the piece unfolded, the air in the room shifted. What had begun as a forced audition transformed into a private concert. Her hands danced over the keys with impossible fluidity, each movement elegant, every transition seamless. Her expression remained calm, focused, as though she had played this piece 1,000 times before, not in practice, but on grand stages. The teachers watched, spellbound. Whispers faded into stunned silence. No one dared speak. Somewhere near the middle of the piece, a flicker of recognition crossed the eyes of one of the older teachers. His brow furrowed as if trying to place a half-remembered name, a distant recital, a forgotten article in a music journal. He tilted his head slightly, watching more intently. The way she held a particular phrase, the exact touch on the keys, it stirred something buried deep in memory. But he said nothing, not yet. She brought the piece to its breathtaking end with a delicate decrescendo that hung in the air like a final breath. The last note faded, and for a moment no one moved. No applause, no reaction, just silence so thick it felt like time itself had stopped. Then slowly, someone began to clap. It was soft at first, hesitant, almost unsure how to process what had just happened. But it spread, building into a slow, reverent applause. There was no cheering, no loud approval, just stunned respect. One teacher finally found his voice, though it came out softer than intended. Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked, almost ashamed of the earlier condescension. The woman looked at him calmly, without bitterness. "I used to teach," she said, "but life took me away from music. Today felt like the right time to return." And with that, she stood and stepped away from the piano, leaving behind only awe. The room remained still long after the final note had faded. The applause had stopped, but no one rushed to speak. The teachers, once so sure of their judgments, sat quietly, some staring at the piano, others at the floor, each lost in their own thoughts. The woman's performance had dismantled every assumption they had made about her. The arrogance that once filled the room had drained completely, replaced with something much heavier, humility. No one could look at her the same way anymore, and more importantly, no one could look at themselves the same way either. One of the younger teachers, who had smirked earlier at her appearance, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Another rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact. Finally, the head teacher stood and approached her slowly. His voice was softer now, careful. "We owe you an apology," he said. "We misjudged you. Badly." She didn't look angry. In fact, she smiled. A small, warm gesture that made the apology sting even more. "It's all right," she said gently. "We all start somewhere. I just started again." There was a pause. Then the older teacher who had suspected her identity stepped forward. "You used to teach, didn't you? I think I remember a performance maybe a decade ago. You disappeared after that." She nodded slightly, her voice even. "Life has a way of taking us places we don't expect. But music, it never really leaves you." Her words carried more than just reflection. They carried forgiveness and wisdom none of them had anticipated. Another teacher, still stunned, finally spoke. "Would you consider working with some of our advanced students? They could learn more from you in 1 hour than we've taught them in a week." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. If I can help, I'd be happy to. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just an unspoken understanding that something important had happened in that room. Not just a revelation of talent, but a quiet dismantling of prejudice, pride, and superficial judgment. She had come in as someone they overlooked, and left as someone they would never forget. As she walked toward the exit, her steps quiet and unhurried, the teachers remained in place, still processing the lesson she had given them without ever intending to teach one. The door closed behind her, and the room seemed different now, quieter, humbled, better. And on screen, as the image fades to black, the words appear, "Genius often hides in silence. Those who listen will hear it speak."